Now, I want to turn to meditation. Meditation is the spiritual practice that's probably best known in the modern world and also the most researched scientifically. We now have access to meditation techniques from many different traditions. The ones that are most widely practiced are probably from the Buddhist and Hindu traditions. But similar practices exist in all religious frameworks. In the Christian context, people have been doing what's called contemplative prayer, which is effectively meditation, in monasteries and religious communities for at least 1,500 years, and still do in many religious communities. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, it's very normal for people to have repetitive mantra-like prayers, like the Jesus prayer. Many Roman Catholics say the Rosary, which involves saying repetitive prayers. We're using these prayer beads. Many Muslims have practices like that. There are many Sufi forms of meditation involving a mantra-like phrase, a wazifa, one of the names of God. But the most familiar, as I say, come from the Buddhist and the Hindu traditions. There are two main types of meditation. One kind involves a mantra, a phrase, or words that you say out loud or silently. The other doesn't involve words, but involves paying attention to the breathing or to sensations in the body, often called mindfulness meditation. Both of them are very common and widely practiced. Let's see, how many people here do meditate or have meditated? Well, that's, I should say, at least 90%. So, well, that makes my job easier because I don't have to describe what it's like. But basically, what these practices do is split the mind through repeating the mantra or paying attention to the breathing or sensations. It provides another focus for attention that takes it away from that insistent chain of thoughts and ruminations that go on in our minds, that internal dialogue, and provides another focus for it. And it enables us to distance ourselves from the thoughts which we're otherwise trapped within, until we can see them going through our minds like clouds floating through the sky. And we become aware that our minds are not those thoughts. Our minds contain those thoughts, like the sky contains the clouds. But there's more to us than just this stream of thoughts, which otherwise we're normally trapped within. When research on meditation began in the 1970s, both kinds, the mantra type and the mindfulness type, were studied. The mantra type was mainly studied by Herbert Benson at Harvard Medical School, and the mindfulness type by John Kabat-Zinn. And they started a whole tradition of meditation research, which is growing year by year. One of the first things that Herbert Benson looked at was what he called the relaxation response, the physiological effects of meditation, which he found lead to quite easily measurable changes, reductions in blood pressure, reducing the heartbeat, and basically a deactivation of the sympathetic nervous system. He called this the relaxation response. As you know, the relaxation response. The sympathetic nervous system, as you know, is part of the autonomic, unconscious nervous system that operates throughout our bodies. And of course, has nothing to do with sympathy. It's to do with fear. The sympathetic nervous system, involving the hormone adrenaline, or in America, epinephrine, causes increased heartbeat, raising the blood pressure, gets people ready to fight or to run away. And that's very necessary if you're in a threatening situation. But in the modern world, many people live in a state of chronic anxiety or fear, where the sympathetic nervous system is activated much more than it needs to be, and for much longer periods than it needs to be. And this has very deleterious effects on the immune system and on general health, also leads to insomnia and other common problems. The other side of the coin of the sympathetic nervous system is the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what's activated when you're not afraid, when you're feeling a lack of fear. And there are certain activities you can only do when the parasympathetic nervous system is predominant. Making love, eating, or going to the lavatory. These are not things you feel inclined to do if you're running away from an angry bull across a field, when your sympathetic nervous system is in full flood. And what Benson showed is that at the most basic level, meditation is leading to this relaxation response. It also leads, as brain scans have shown, to a great reduction in the activity of the default mode network, which is that series of brain areas which together are involved in ruminations or internal dialogue. It's not the only way that to shut down the default mode network. Another way is to be engaged in physical activities. I had an American friend who used to run a business school, and he said when he was at his busiest, he just couldn't stop thinking. He couldn't sleep. His mind was very active. He tried meditating. It didn't work. But by the time he was 50 feet up a rock face as a rock climber, he said he was completely in the present. And I think, in fact, in the modern world, many people carry out sports activities because they do have this ability to bring them into the present and shut down the default mode network. In fact, I think sports are one of the most unacknowledged kinds of spiritual practice in modern secular societies. Studies on the brains of long-term meditators, including Tibetan monks, show that there are anatomical changes in the brain as a result of meditation, and that there are different kinds of brain rhythm going on in the brains of experienced and long practicing meditators. Now, all these studies show us something about the effects of meditation, and some of them are medically beneficial. In Britain, you can now get a prescription for meditation from a psychiatrist on the National Health Service, because if you have a mild or moderate depression, it's been found that meditation works as well or better than antidepressant drugs, has fewer side effects, and of course, from the point of view of the National Health Service, has the advantage of being cheaper. This is now widely advocated for its health benefits, for not being frazzled, for leading a more balanced life in a stressful world. And something like 18 million Americans now meditate. But that's not why people meditate in traditional spiritual contexts. People in ancient India and in Buddhist societies and in contemplative communities, in monasteries and so on, were not meditating so they could be less frazzled by the stresses of modern life. They were meditating for quite different motives. They were meditating because they thought that by going into the very basis of our own consciousness, the ground of our own minds, we contact the source of all minds. The Hindus are the people who explain it most clearly, I think. The general view in Advaitic Hinduism is that everything ultimately depends on and comes forth from the ultimate consciousness that underlies the universe, Brahman. And this ultimate consciousness is the source of all minds within the universe. Human and non-human minds are all derivative from that ultimate mind, like fractals of that ultimate consciousness. One of their favorite metaphors is of buckets of water reflecting the moon at night. You can have hundreds of buckets of water. All of them have a little moon reflected in them. And it looks like hundreds of moons, but actually they're all reflections of the same moon. There's only one moon, and these are all different reflections of it. And in the same way, all our minds are reflections of the ultimate mind. And by going to the basis of our own mind, not being trapped in our ongoing thoughts and ruminations, by getting to the very basis of consciousness itself, instead of being trapped in thoughts and ruminations, we can get to a state where we feel that we're at the basis of awareness or consciousness itself. And that is not separate from the divine consciousness. The Keda Upanishad, one of the Hindu ancient holy texts, says, "Not that which is seen by the eyes, but that whereby the eyes can see, know that alone to be Brahman, the Lord." And then, "Not that which is known by the mind, but that whereby the mind can know that alone to be Brahman, the Lord." It's saying that God is the basis of consciousness itself. God is consciousness, it is the basis of all consciousness. God is not a being out there that you can actually find by sending out space probes or photographing. And so the remarks by some of the Russian astronauts when they first went into space said, "We've gone into the heavens and we haven't found God," which many atheists regarded as a knockdown argument, is actually irrelevant to this whole thing, because it's about the nature of consciousness. And the only way we can explore the nature of consciousness is through consciousness itself. The reason that mystical experiences, whether achieved through meditation or occurring spontaneously or for other spiritual practices, are blissful, and why many people find them so intensely satisfying, and why they change people's lives, is, from this traditional point of view, because the ultimate mind of the universe is blissful. God's mind is complete. It's not going anywhere. It has no lacks and no desires, because it's already the fullness of everything. And so the Hindu analysis of the nature of the divine mind is threefold: Sat, Chit, Ananda. Sat is the ground of being, the basis of consciousness itself. Chit is the things that are known, thoughts, or what the Indians often call names and forms, nama rupa. What you know, the forms, the structures, the meanings, the connections in nature, that which is known by consciousness. And Ananda is joy or bliss, and is an aspect of the spirit aspect of the ultimate mind, which is also the dynamical or moving principle. Insofar as you contact the divine mind, you experience a taste of this bliss that is part of that ultimate state of consciousness. The Christian view of the nature of the divine mind is very similar. Indeed, all religions have this kind of Trinitarian structure about ultimate reality. In the Christian Holy Trinity, which is really a model of the internal psychology or physiology of the divine, the ground of all consciousness, the Father, is the ground of consciousness itself. When Moses asked God who he was when he saw the burning bush in the desert, God's reply, his first self-announcement in the Old Testament, is, "I am that I am," a state of conscious being in the present, consciousness. The second person of the Holy Trinity is the Logos, the Word, which is about words, forms, orders, patterns, the basis of all the forms in nature. And the Spirit, the third part, is the dynamical principle, the breath, the wind, the air, and also the love, joy, or bliss. So in all religion, the Buddhists also have a kind of Trinitarian structure. They phrase it rather differently. But there's this sense in which meditation is, in all spiritual practices, a way of contacting this ultimate mind and recognizing our direct connection with it. Now, for atheists who meditate and materialists, it's all just inside the brain. It's nothing but nervous activity in the brain and neurotransmitter releases and so on. And it's true that those things happen, but the fact that there are changes in the brain when people experience bliss or joy through meditation or other spiritual experiences doesn't prove it's nothing but the brain. You can see me standing here now and you can hear me talking. And if you were in an fMRI machine, there would be characteristic changes inside your brains associated with what you're seeing and what you're hearing. But that doesn't prove that I'm nothing but the activity of your brain or at least I hope it doesn't prove that. The fact that the brain goes into a certain state relates it to things which are beyond the brain. And that is, I think, or at least it's the way that traditional religious people or spiritually minded people would interpret meditation. Materialists don't interpret it that way, but nevertheless, they have the same kinds of experience. And this is actually at the very frontier of the materialist, non-materialist debate at the moment. But the beauty of it is you can actually come to a decision through your own experience. You can start meditating without having to believe anything. You can just base it on experience. But you may change your belief system as a result of what you experience. You may prefer the theory of materialism to the actual direct experience of your own, if you think the theory trumps actual experience. Or you may feel that the experience is more reliable than a theory, which is notoriously bad at explaining consciousness. Personally, I trust the experience more than the materialist theory. And in fact, I think we need a much bigger theory of nature.